It's the Fun Kids Science Weekly. Now, get this right. Scientists have discovered, I think, something that we all knew was probably true. I mean, I know that I think it's true when I see something that's tasty looking and I just have to have it. But apparently, your gut can control your mind. But how is that true, though? Katarina Johnson is from the University of Oxford. She's done the research on this and she can tell us more. Katarina, hello.
Oh, hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Really hungry, I reckon, after this. Right, so what exactly is bacteria?
Yeah, so bacteria are tiny living organisms. And they're a type of microorganism because we can't actually see them with our naked eye and only with a microscope. And they're made of just a single cell. So that's different to our own bodies, which are made up of trillions of different types of cells. And because they're so tiny, we don't notice them, but they live all around us and in us. So we have lots of bacteria living in our gut and also on our skin and in our mouth. And actually, this is a cool fact. We have over 100 trillion microorganisms in our gut. So that's actually more than the total number of stars in the whole of the Milky Way galaxy. And we're roughly half human and half bacteria. So if you actually count the number of cells in our body, only half of them are human and the others belong to bacterial cells. But it's kind of interesting because we used to think that bacteria were the bad guys causing disease, but we've started to realize that actually most of them don't cause us any harm. And in fact, they're really good for our health and important for making sure that our bodies can function correctly.
So they're physical things, bacteria. They might be tiny, 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 but they exist. They habit space. How does something like that then, a bacteria, a type of cell in our gut, affect, abstract thoughts and feelings and emotions that we have in our brain?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to be careful. Maybe it's not quite that bacteria can really control our minds. That sounds really exciting. But we do know that there are some types of bacteria that can change the chemistry of our brains and so maybe affect how we feel and how we feel on our mood. But yeah, that's a very good question. How do bacteria living all the way down in our gut affect our brain and how we feel? And that's actually something that us scientists are still really trying to figure out. So we know that there's a main nerve called the vagus nerve, and it sends signals directly from our gut to our brain. But there are other possible ways that our gut can communicate with our brain. So, for example, through our immune response. So our immune system is part of our body that helps us to ward off potentially bad bacteria and to deal with infection. And we know that our gut bacteria are really important for keeping our immune system in order. And in turn, like the state of our immune system can then influence our mood. But one of the really cool facts is that bacteria that live in our gut can actually make chemicals of identical structure to our brain's own neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are the chemicals made by our bodies to send signals along nerves. So you may have heard of things like serotonin, which is kind of the happy chemical. And bacteria can actually produce these neurotransmitters too. But at the moment, we don't know whether these neurotransmitters that are made by bacteria in our gut can actually find their way all the way to our brain.
So if, we see adverts on the telly sometimes for a yogurt or something, and it will say, probiotic full of the best bacteria that you need. It's actually bacteria in a bottle. And then we're drinking that. Is that affecting what we're thinking?
Well, yeah, so they do. There are companies that sell yogurts with live bacteria in them. But the types of bacteria in these yogurts aren't always identical to the types of bacteria that naturally live in our gut. And this is a bit of an uncertain issue at the moment, because even if we drink yogurt that has this bacteria in, our own guts are completely jam-packed with bacteria. And so some studies suggest that it's really hard for new bacteria that we eat to actually be able to stick around in our gut, and it might pass straight through. But there was some interesting research that did find that people that were given these probiotic yogurts, which is what they're called with the live bacteria, it actually did change how their brains worked when they went into a medical imaging scanner after they've been having this yogurt for a few weeks. So it is definitely a new thing that we're looking at the moment, whether what we eat can really, change our mood. And we've all heard of the phrase, you are what you eat, but maybe that's even more real than we realized before.
Now, quite a lot of how we feel that's affected by what we see, what we touch, is all moved that way from evolution. For instance, if I touch something that's hot, I feel a lot of pain, so I'm probably not going to do that again, so I don't need a new arm or something. Why? Yeah, exactly. Why would bacteria in my gut making me happy have evolved to do that?
Yeah, so this is the thing that we were really interested to find out, whether our gut bacteria, would they want to potentially kind of almost manipulate us for their own benefit and survival. But we don't think that our bacteria can really control us. But we do think that because as humans, we've evolved for thousands of years with these microbes living in our guts. And so we may have actually come to depend on our gut microbes for normal brain function. And so this might mean that, for example, if we're missing some important microbes from our gut, so maybe taking antibiotics, which kills a lot of bacteria, this could have effects not just on our gut, but may actually disrupt the communication from our gut to our brain. So yeah, it's an interesting area, and one of the ways that we really think that bacteria might affect the brain is because when they break down the food in our gut, they produce waste products, and some of these waste products can directly affect our brains, or they might be able to influence other aspects of our bodies that then affects how we feel, like our immune system.
Now, this study is dealing with tiny little cells that you can't see. There are trillions of them in our body right now, and we don't really, we can't track what they're doing and why they're doing it. So how are you researching this to find the information that we're talking about today?
Yes, so we're lucky that we live in this age of really advanced technology, particularly in science. And so now what we can do is we can actually sequence the DNA in these bacteria to understand how the types of different species that are living in your gut, and to try and understand the composition of your gut by kind of considering it as kind of its own ecosystem almost. So some of my own research looks at how the types of bacteria that are living in our gut may even influence things like personality traits in people. But I'm also kind of investigating whether if we change the types of gut bacteria in animals, so for example, if you give them something like an antibiotic that will reduce the numbers of bacteria that they have in their guts, can this affect their brains? And in particular, whether this can affect part of their brain that we know is important for how an animal behaves.
Brilliant. It's just such an odd minefield of cells and how we think, and I'm just so delighted that we're only going to learn more about this. It's truly fascinating. When we do, Katerina, come on, tell us loads more, please.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we know about that gut feeling, but it really seems that it's coming to life now. So yeah, I'll be in touch with more research. Brilliant.
Katerina Johnson is from the University of Oxford. Thank you so much for coming on the Fun Kids Science Weekly.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.